citing what he calls an existential threat to mankind. President Biden has taken sweeping actions to, in the words of the Los Angeles Times, fight climate change. Now, these actions are pretty comprehensive. I won't go into all of them. He's blocking new oil and gas leases. He's created a White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy, another National Climate Task Force. So all this swelling of the bureaucracy. But even more startling, he wants climate to be a key element of our foreign policy. So unlike the old days, we're not going to fight the Soviet Union. Apparently, we're not going to be fighting China. We're not going to be fighting the Islamic radicals. We're going to be fighting the climate. We're going to be fighting the climate. Now, first of all, there seems to be a kind of deep hubris about all this. A deep hubris that somehow the climate is susceptible to being fought and to being changed. I mean, let me start with a simple proposition. Could the resources of the United States be somehow deployed to alter the climate in a 1 mile radius around my house? Let's see if you can do it. Change the climate. Can you control it? No. And if you can't do it for a 1 mile radius around my house, how on earth, so to speak, can you do it for the whole earth, for the entire planet? People say, well, Dinesh, you're confusing weather and climate. No, I'm not. It's actually much easier to control the weather. Weather is temporary, weather is local. Climate, you may say, is universal. If you can't control the weather, you actually think you can control the climate, the average temperature of the entire Earth measured over a long period of time? Are you insane? Now, George Carlin, the comedian, had some very insightful things to say about the mentality behind this.
Planet is fine. Compared to the people, the planet is doing great. It's been here 4.5 billion years. Did you ever think about the arithmetic? Planet has been here 4.5 billion years. We've been here, what, 100,000? Maybe 200,000. And we've only been engaged in heavy industry for a little over 200 years. 200 years versus 4.5 billion. And we have the conceit to think that somehow we're a threat, that somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful little blue-green ball that's just floating around the sun. The planet has been through a lot worse than us. Been through all kinds of things worse than us. Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drift, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles, hundreds of thousands of years of bombardment by comets and asteroids and meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages, and we think some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference?
Where is George Carlin when we need him now? Now, of course, I can see the kind of imperious leftist go, "Oh, George, you're not familiar with the science. Oh, Dinesh, don't be such a climate denier, such a denier of science." Well, science is based on hypothesis, experiment, testing, prediction, verification. Now, this same climate crew in the 1970s was warning about global cooling. Global cooling. There's a book on this which was endorsed by all these prominent scientists called Global Cooling. Look it up. So for 10 years they were talking about global cooling. Then they started talking about global warming. And because they realized this sounds kind of stupid, the Earth is cooling, the Earth is warming, then they switched to climate change. But the most important point here is that all their predictions have been wrong. Go back to Al Gore. Listen to his rhetoric based on the science. Oh, we only have 5 years left, guys. We only have 10 years left. We only have 15 years left. And when the 15 years passes, we have another 15 years left. So this is called making predictions that are invalidated by events. This is called the phenomenon of the end of the world has to be constantly postponed. You know who else does this stuff? Televangelists. I remember in the 1980s reading Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth, based on biblical prophecy. The idea The end of the world is at hand. It's coming. And it's only a few years away. And then when it doesn't happen, oh, well, the end of the world is coming. It's just going to happen a little bit later now. And a little bit later and a little bit later. The record of the climate change crowd is exactly the same as the record of the televangelists, which is they have been, on this point, 100% wrong 100% of the time. It is the most dismal record of any scientific hypothesis that I can remember, certainly in my lifetime. Now, this notion of fighting climate change reminds me a lot about this guy. Here's my copy of Herodotus, the Histories. And in it, there's a remarkable scene. The Persian king Xerxes is trying to cross the Hellespont, which is now the Dardanelles, at that time seemed to be the dividing line of water between Asia and Europe. And Xerxes' troops had a lot of difficulty crossing the Hellespont. You may say that the ocean was, the river was uncooperative. And so when Xerxes got some of his troops to the other side, he ordered the Hellespont, the river, to be flogged. 300 lashes to the river. Why? To punish the river for making all these difficulties for the Persians. And of course, we read this in Herodotus and we kind of laugh and we go, wasn't it stupid? What are you trying? You think you can control the ocean, Xerxes? You think you can actually control the sea? But our morons are trying to do the same thing. They're stupider than Xerxes. Herodotus treated Xerxes as a barbarian because he says his behavior is fundamentally irrational. Herodotus liked people from other cultures. He didn't call them all barbarians, but he called Xerxes a barbarian. Why? Because of this hubristic, idiotic notion that you can somehow manipulate the world, nature, to your end. I think we are in possession, the left, not us, in possession of a similar hubris, or similar stupidity. And this notion of sort of controlling the Earth's temperature is our version of flogging the Hellespont.